As a big fan of the fighting game scene in the 1990s, I love that Street Fighter, Tekken, and even Fatal Fury are finding new success all these decades later. But while I suppose that it's cool hearing about a new Virtua Fighter sequel, part of me wonders where all the weird fighting games have gone. You know, the ones where rival schools were united by fate and dinosaurs peed on each other. If you too are looking for something that's a little bit off of the beaten path, then let me introduce you to Mostroscopy. It's a brand new one-on-one fighter where masked luchador wrestlers take on ghoulish characters straight out of monster movies from the 1950s. That's right, I want you to embrace the B-rate schlock when I review Mostroscopy by Seashell Studio. While other fighting games give you Street Fighters, anime characters, and for some reason sports athletes, Mostroscopy goes in a completely different direction. Taking inspiration from classic titles like Darkstalkers and Battle Monsters, this new game fills its roster with vampires, werewolves, mummies, ghosts, monster hunting samurais, and masked luchadors? Oh yeah, from the moment you hear that retro music and see the film artifacts, you know that you're gonna be in for a cheesy good time. This is a throwback to the good old days when fighting games didn't need a lengthy story mode that tied everything together, because all you really need is a brief cinema that sets up the character and an ending that leaves everything vague enough for a possible sequel. That's what you get with the 16 characters in Mostroscopy. Each one, be it a ghoul, ghost, monster, or wrestler, has their own motivation to fight in graveyards, temples, laboratories, and other scary locations. This usually, but not always, culminates in a fight with the game's big bad boss, a character named Starman who fights in a stage inspired by MC Escher. Although it's a throwback in more ways than one, the gameplay here isn't inspired by Street Fighter or any of its clones. Instead, what we get is a much more accessible setup that splits the combat into two different buttons, either a regular attack or a special move. In both cases, the move you pull off depends on the way you're holding the D-pad or analog stick. For example, you may throw a fireball by holding forward and hitting the special move button, while holding down and pressing the same button may unleash an uppercut. Now, I use the word accessible to describe the gameplay rather than simplistic, because while it certainly seems simple at first, it never comes across as being shallow. Even if you don't have to memorize a bunch of joystick motions to pull off a special move, there's still a lot of skill involved. One thing you can do is charge up the various moves in order to make them bigger and more powerful. There are also aerial attacks and a whole bunch of complicated combos for those wanting to graduate to high-level play. But look, even if you're just a casual fight fan, or somebody who's completely new to the genre, you're gonna still have an easy time getting into the action and competing with the more seasoned players. Of course, the real draw here are the ghoulish characters, and they do not disappoint. I love how the mummy nurse Lisa swings from a metal cage and rides on a giant syringe. The werewolf Kitty is also a favorite. Though more traditionally designed than most of the characters on the roster, her aggressive fight style and vicious bites lead to a lot of really fun combos. El Charro Negro is an old skeleton cowboy who comes packed with a couple of pistols and a powerful lasso, while Graf von Drachenhausen is a vampire that double-teams the competition with his shadow. Other characters include the actual embodiment of La Llorona, a winged demon named Luzbel, a Japanese assassin with a samurai sword and an attack dog, and even a giant robot that looks like it was made out of an old refrigerator. And that is the charm of this game. A lot of the characters and backgrounds look like they came straight out of one of those cheesy horror and luchador movies that came out of Mexico in the 1950s and 60s. The sets are silly, the effects are often unbelievable, and there's just enough story here to get you invested in each character. The whole game has this heavy filter that makes it look like you're watching a long-lost movie print that was found at the bottom of an old dumpster. It's grainy, full of film artifacts, and in desperate need of a Criterion Collection restoration. And just wait until you get your eyes on the Technicolor stages, which are bright and vibrant in all the wrong ways. I loved every second of this aesthetic, but you really need to know what it's referencing to get the most out of Mostroscopy. While I'm no expert on 1950s Luchador cinema, I do appreciate the outlandish designs. While not every level is visually interesting, there are a few here that go out of their way to give us something that we've never seen before in a video game. And the world building being done in some of these stages is actually really impressive. That said, I do kind of wish that there was more to the game's various endings. Yes, they're certainly vague enough to lead to a sequel if needed, but I gotta say that many of them aren't all that satisfying. They also aren't nearly as interesting as the comic book style cinemas that set up each story. Between the artwork and the horror, these cinemas remind me of mid-century comic books like Tales from the Crypt and the Vault of Horror. I kinda wish there were more of them. Unfortunately, there are a few other things that keep this game from stacking up with this generation's best fighters. One of the biggest knocks against it is that there's not a way to take the fight online and go up against a world filled with players. If you really want to play against another person, then you're gonna need a friend and a second controller. Beyond the local multiplayer, you can go up against the computer or just watch two computer opponents fight against each other. And really, that's about it. It's also worth mentioning that Mostroscopy is a bare-boned package with very few worthwhile modes. There's the typical training mode that gives you a chance to practice the moves and combos, though it would have been nice if the game gave you a little bit more information on, well, how to play. For example, you'll occasionally unleash Monstro mode, but nowhere in the game does it explain what it is or even how to take advantage of it. There's a challenge mode that really could have taught the player the finer details about the game, but instead all it does is have you pulling off tricky combos. I found this boring. Look, while there isn't a whole lot to keep the solo player going for long, and the lack of online multiplayer means that the game's likely going to collect dust on my console, there really is a lot about this game that I like. From the characters to the art style, Mostroscopy has a lot of potential as a franchise. I especially like the retro music, which is heavy on the Dick Dale-styled surf guitars. If all this clicks for you, then you're going to have a lot of fun fighting through this monster of a fighting game. At least for a little while. If you've been waiting for the return of weird fighting games, then Mostroscopy has you covered. With a mix of ghouls, ghosts, monsters, and masked luchador wrestlers, this throwback fighter is overflowing with personality. Thankfully, the easy-to-pull-off special moves and cheesy backgrounds help to sell the 1950s aesthetic, and the music is so catchy that it's almost scary. Fight fans will likely be disappointed by not only the limited modes, but also the lack of multiplayer battles. Mostroscopy is easy to get into and full of charm, but I have a hunch your fun's going to be limited if you don't have a lot of friends to play with. Hey, thanks for watching my review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite weird fighting game? I'm not talking about the ones with the normal Street Fighters, but rather the weird and even novelty fighters that are on the margins. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back later this week with more reviews and a cool feature that looks at Doom-inspired magazine covers. While I wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Till then.